Imagine a bolt of silk. It is lighter than water. It catches light like liquid metal. In the markets of ancient Rome, it was worth its weight in gold. In the court of a Han emperor, it was currency, tribute, and symbol of heaven itself. And between those two worlds stretched thousands of miles of desert, mountain, and ocean, and the most consequential geography lesson in the history of money. This is the story of how the physical shape of the earth decided who got rich, who stayed poor, who rose to empire, and who faded to dust. It is a story of silk and spice, and it begins, as all great money stories do, with someone realizing they had something someone else desperately wanted. The Silk Road may have formally opened trade between the Far East and Europe during the Han Dynasty of China. Han Emperor Wu sent his imperial envoy Zhang Qian westward in 138 BC to make contact with cultures in Central Asia. Zhang Qian was captured, held for years, and still completed his mission. His reports described a world of horses, gold, and distant kingdoms hungry for Chinese goods. Interestingly, the ancient Greek word for China is Ceres, meaning the land of silk. Historians now prefer the term Silk Routes, which more accurately reflects that there was more than one thoroughfare. The Silk Road was a network of Asian trade routes active from the 2nd century BCE until the mid-15th century. Spanning over 6,400 kilometers on land, it played a central role in facilitating economic, cultural, political, and religious interactions between the Eastern and Western worlds. But call it a road, and you already misunderstand it. This intricate route was not a single, defined road, but rather an amalgamation of numerous interconnected paths that wove their way across the landscapes. Deserts and mountain passes, river valleys, and steppe corridors. Geography did not offer a straight line, it offered a puzzle, and whoever solved that puzzle collected a toll. The first great solvers were the Parthians. With the defeat of the Seleucid king Antiochus, Mesopotamia came under Parthian rule, and with it came control of the Silk Road. The Parthians then became the central intermediaries between China and the West. The Parthians controlled the crucial central segment and demanded high taxes on goods, frustrating both Rome and China. They deliberately kept East and West from direct contact to preserve their profitable position. As a hub connecting the East and the West geographically and economically, Parthia strengthened its economic strength with these tolls, which also enabled it to gain the upper hand in many wars with the Roman Empire. Rome was addicted and furious in equal measure. The Romans first caught sight of silk while fighting the Parthians in war. Eventually the Romans bought silk through the Parthians, and the wearing of silk garments grew so popular in Rome that Emperor Tiberius saw it as an instrument of decadence. Roman senators debated it in the Forum. Moralists condemned it. And still the ships and caravans came because the market was stronger than the sermon. Pliny the Elder put numbers to the humiliation. Trade between India and Rome grew quickly from the 1st century BCE as merchants realized the scale of profits. Pliny mentions that goods purchased in India could be sold for 100 times the price in the Roman Empire. In his Naturalis Historia, Pliny describes India as the sink of the world's most precious metals, and writes in Book 12 that there is no year which does not drain the empire of at least 55 million sesterces to India alone. Elsewhere in the same work, in Book 6, he gives the figure as 50 million sesterces for India. Across both passages, his complaint is consistent. India, China, and the Arabian Peninsula together took 100 million sesterces from the empire per year at a conservative estimate. The currency throughout is sesterces, silver coin, not gold, and scholars note that even Pliny's round figures should be read as moral rhetoric as much as precise accounting. But Rome found a way around the middleman. It was written in the wind. The writer of the 1st century Periplus of the Erythraean Sea credited a Greek navigator named Hippolus with discovering the direct route from the Red Sea across the open Indian Ocean to the Malabar coast of India. By plotting the scheme of the sea and the correct location of the trade ports along the Indian coast. The wind had already been known in earlier times and had been used by southern Arabian and Indian sailors to cross the Indian Ocean. But for Western merchants, this knowledge transformed everything. The harnessing of the monsoon winds in the 1st century made it possible for traders to cross the Indian Ocean, rather than merely coasting along the shores, and direct trade between the Roman Empire and India expanded greatly. According to the geographer Strabo, by the time of Augustus, up to 120 ships were setting sail every year from Mios Hormuz to India. Roman ships carried wine, olive oil, glassware, and coin. In return, they received pepper, cinnamon, cassia, ginger, turmeric, cardamom, frankincense, myrrh, fine cotton textiles, Chinese silk, gemstones, and pearls. Proof of this Roman commercial reach can be found in the great quantities of Roman coins discovered near important commercial sites and routes across India. Now look at what geography had just done. The monsoon winds, a meteorological fact of the Indian Ocean, had shifted an entire empire's trade strategy. The Parthians were bypassed. The Red Sea ports of Egypt became the new arteries of Roman wealth. Geography had given the Parthians their monopoly, and geography took it away. Centuries passed. Empires fell. The roots frayed and revived. Then came the Mongols, and with them something almost impossible: peace. The Pax Mongolica describes a period of relative stability in Eurasia under the Mongol Empire during the 13th and 14th centuries. After the death of Genghis Khan in 1227, the resulting empire extended from China's Pacific coast to Eastern Europe. This meant that the Silk Road network, which had been dangerous to travel due to warring kingdoms, fell completely under Mongol control. The resulting stability opened these ancient trade routes to a largely undisturbed exchange of goods between peoples, from Europe to East Asia. Long-distance trade brought new methods of doing business from the Far East to Europe. Bills of exchange, deposit banking, and insurance were introduced to Europe during the Pax Mongolica. It was no coincidence that Marco Polo's famed trip to China came at the Mongol Empire's peak in the 13th century. His party of Venetian merchants traversed an overland route between the Middle East and China. Their passage would scarcely have been possible without the system of order the empire had imposed across Central Asia, but the same routes that carried silk and porcelain also carried plague. The efficient trade routes led to the rapid and unchecked spread of the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death. In the 1340s, the bacterium Yersinia pestis travelled the Silk Road from Central Asia to the Mediterranean. The Mongol siege of Kaffa in 1346 is widely associated with that transmission. According to a 14th century account by the Genoese chronicler Gabriele de Musi, infected corpses were catapulted over the city walls, and Genoese trading ships then carried the disease westward. Scholars debate how literally to take de Musi, who was not present at Kaffa, and recent research suggests that even if the biological attack occurred as described, the broader entry of plague into Europe from the Crimea likely involved multiple pathways beyond that single event. What is not in dispute is the catastrophic result. The pandemic killed an estimated 75 to 200 million people across Eurasia, collapsing trade networks that had taken centuries to build. The overland routes withered. The money map had to be redrawn again, and into that vacuum stepped two small cities on the coast of Italy. From the 8th until the 15th century, the maritime republics of Venice, Genoa, and others held a monopoly on European trade with the Middle East. The silk and spice trade made these Mediterranean city-states extremely wealthy. During the high and late medieval periods, Muslim traders dominated maritime spice trading routes throughout the Indian Ocean, tapping source regions in the Far East and shipping spices from trading emporiums in India westward to the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, from which overland routes led to Europe. Venice and Genoa waited at the western end of that chain, and they did not wait cheaply. On its journey from India and Asia, a spice had often changed hands through so many traders, all wanting to make profits, that the price could easily be as high as 40 times the amount paid when it was first purchased at source. The wealthy of the medieval world were willing to pay such a price, not only for the pleasure of spice in their food and for its medicinal benefit, but also because the appearance of spices in their household was the equivalent today of parking a Ferrari in your driveway, a symbol of wealth and status. In the 10th century, both Venice and Genoa began to prosper through trade in the Levant. Over the centuries, a bitter rivalry developed, culminating in the naval war of Chioggia from 1378 to 1381, in which Venice defeated Genoa and emerged as the dominant power in Mediterranean commerce. The victory was decisive but not total. Genoa retained significant eastern trade interests of its own, remaining the dominant commercial force in the Black Sea until the fall of Constantinople in 1453. And both republics had suffered enormous economic damage in the war. Venice, however, steadily consolidated its advantage in the high-value spice routes through the Aegean and Levant, making exorbitant profits by trading spices with buyer distributors from northern and western Europe. Black pepper, historians have noted, was the spice that built Venice. Then in 1453, the whole calculus changed again. In 1453 came the fall of Constantinople. The capital of the Byzantine Empire was conquered by the Ottoman Empire, and one of the principal land routes for spices into Europe was lost. The Ottomans imposed taxes on goods passing through the city, generating significant revenue. The high taxes led many European traders to seek alternative routes to Asia, particularly for the lucrative spice trade. Historians debate exactly how sharp this disruption was in practice, and it is worth noting. Many sources state the Ottoman Empire blocked the Silk Road by increasing taxes, but this is not supported by a larger body of historical research. In fact, there was no general decline in spice imports to Europe after 1453, because Constantinople was not the major route in the spice trade, and most trade instead came from Alexandria or Beirut. The pressure was real, but it was as much psychological and political as it was economic. Either way, the response was decisive. The Western Europeans, not wanting to be dependent on an expansionist power for lucrative Eastern commerce, set about finding an alternate sea route around Africa. The first country to attempt to circumnavigate Africa was Portugal, which had, since the early 15th century, begun to explore northern Africa under Henry the Navigator. In 1488, Bartolomeu Dias became the first European navigator to round the southern tip of Africa, though his ship swept around the Cape in a storm without sighting it, and he only laid eyes on the Cape of Good Hope itself on the return voyage. And in 1497, Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape, continued to the eastern coast of Africa, and sailed across the Indian Ocean to Calicut in South India. At long last, Europeans had direct access to Indian spices without the intervention of Arab traders. Venice had monopolized the spice trade from India through the Arab lands using exclusive trade agreements. This prompted the Spanish and the Portuguese to embark on the search for a new route to India, leading to the discovery of the Americas and the start of the modern age. And there it is, the full arc, a bolt of silk traded through a gap in the mountains of Central Asia, taxed by the Parthians, carried on the monsoon winds to Rome, revived by the Mongol Peace, monopolized by a lagoon city in Italy, then finally rerouted around an entire continent. Every turn in that story was geography pressing on economics, and economics pressing back on geography. The money map of the ancient and medieval world was not drawn by kings or merchants. It was drawn by passes and prevailing winds, by the shape of coastlines and the chemistry of ocean currents. Whoever read that map first and moved fastest got rich. Whoever ignored it paid the toll. We still live in that world. The Strait of Malacca, the Suez Canal, the South China Sea. The names have changed. The logic has not. Every episode of the Agora takes many hours to research, verify, and craft, because the story of money deserves to be told properly. If you found this worthwhile, subscribe and turn on notifications to follow the series as it unfolds. Thank you for watching.